Hypocrisy leads to hatred. So the title is exactly the video. Now, people work, everyone works, right? So I'll use the workforce to describe what I'm trying to convey with this video. Um, Now you can interpret this however you want. I'm just going to use examples, and I'm just going to try to say something ubiquitous and kind of like with a wide range so everyone can kind of relate it to their lives. So we all know of a boss or someone who has wielded some type of power over other people, right? Um, for people in this space, typically they're talking about positions or ways that they felt powerless towards the system, right? Like in dating relationships, but in the workforce, this would be like a boss or like a manager, and you disagree with the manager, but maybe you see the manager do one thing, but then with you, they do another thing. Um, I think hypocrisy naturally breeds resentment, but then this resentment ends up turning into hatred. Um, I think this is something that people need to recognize because a lot of times when we see people who come up with opinions and they say things and they make generalizations, we assume that they're just people that hate other people for a lack of rationality, right? They're just hating for the sake of hating. We don't assume that it actually comes as a result of some sort of hypocrisy on the part of another person or an entity or a bureaucracy or a system, right? Um, a lot of times you get, for example, so for motorcycles, I have a motorcycle and I am endeavoring in riding motorcycles and becoming fluent with it. Um, a lot of motorcycle riders hate car drivers. They don't like cars, right? It doesn't mean they hate individual people in the cars. They just hate the system of driving a car, then people on bikes getting hit and blah blah blah. Now I know if you're riding a car, you think like, well, there's guys doing wheelies and acting crazy and stuff. I understand that, but the hatred, the resentment comes from the lack of accountability as well, not just hypocrisy, but the lack of accountability, which kind of goes along with it. Lack of accountability for a lot of car drivers due to the inherent power dynamics, right? A lot of times the hatred flows from the bottom to the top, or I think hatred kind of flows, maybe it flows down, right? Because a lot of times the people who are feeling hatred, it's coming from a sense of powerlessness. It's coming from a sense of not having a voice, not having, not being able to surmount your issues. A lot of people stop resenting and stop hating once they actually once they actually perceive themselves as winning, once they believe they've won, then the hatred and resentment kind of dissipates, or at least it slowly fades, right? Um, this you would probably see as from an example in the dating world, it'd be like a guy who after years of being invisible, maybe in his 30s, he gets this really good tech job and now he's making high five, six figures. And now he doesn't really have the hatred and resentment he has towards the world because he can get what he wants. He can, he's got more attention from the women because he's got more confidence, and now he gets invited to more parties, or he's got a lot of cool things that he likes, and he feels genuine contentment with his life. Um, so he doesn't feel like he's being held down by this greater power. I think hypocrisy um, is the source of a lot of resentment, that and a lack of accountability. So, individuals and entities and institutions that breed hypocrisy and breed between multiple groups, where one group gets to do whatever they want and the other group has to coincide with specific rules, but then the other group gets to skate around those rules. This will cause this will cause an unbalance. This will cause instability in a social system. This will cause large amounts of hatred. This will cause large amounts of resentment and will eventually breed violence. Um, this has always been a thing. You have movements, revolutions that have always happened throughout history, and a large part of this came from hypocrisy. It came from the fact that you had people who thought they were better than other people, and those people got to do things based off of how they felt, based off of how they felt about themselves and their egos, right? And there was nothing to keep this in check. So then what happened in these revolutions where these people were actually caught, and where these people, the people who had to be at the brunt of it, they had enough of it. So then a lot of times you had literal revolutions where people got their heads gone, right? And just gotten rid of, and those systems abolished. This is kind of the natural flow of systems, social systems in the human, in the human element. Whatever this experiment is, it seems to be natural that hypocrisy leads to hatred. It leads to resentment, then it leads to hatred. So my thing is just understand this: like, if someone has a belief about something, whether it's dealing with one group or another group, or maybe it's a generalization for a specific group. Um, yeah, you could shame them. Yeah, you could, get angry at them or laugh at them. Um, like for example, incels, we often we'll dabble at saying things about them, and we'll focus on them as a person to try to discard what they're saying, to discredit them as a person. But if we actually had enough courage to unpack what they're saying about whatever institution or whatever group of people, whether it's a concept or a specific person, if we could actually unpack it, then perhaps we could actually make revelations about how to change systems and how to actually eliminate either the hatred or resentment that that person or those group of people actually feel. um, this is one of the things I hate about modern society, is that when a person feels something very strongly, and when they actually pinpoint at least some of the problems, we end up looking at that person and just saying, no, you suck, right? And that's all we do. Like, if the person actually sucks, fine, okay, they suck, they don't have a job, they're not relevant, okay. But why not weigh the whole thing? Why not at least entertain the entire argument and actually break it down and see if it has some merit? That's the problem with the modern world. We always use little buzzwords to kind of dismiss people, right? So then they go back into their misery, and then what happens? Just more pressure in this powder keg. It's almost like the world wants to create more pressure and wants to create more confusion and more pain, because we want the explosion, we want the boom. But why? What if we actually could go in the middle of this thing and actually diffuse it so we don't have a boom, right? I don't think there's a point in having a boom. But what I'm saying doesn't just pertain to the dating world. This pertains to anything. Hypocrisy and lack of accountability in any given system, from any particular superior, from any particular person, it leads to hatred. It leads to hatred, and it leads to all kinds of debauchery and bad issues and problems. Eventually leads to violence, and then leads to revolution. Um, yeah, obviously there's things happening, so I don't really have to express what it is. I'm just saying the concept, the conceptual idea behind it. Uh, Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Comment down below if you have any thoughts. This is a concept that I've just thought about today. Granted, it's not necessarily new, but it's just something I'm thinking about. Hypocrisy leads to hatred.